Good afternoon, everybody. We're today, Rural Insights is very pleased to have join us two gentlemen who are the CEOs of two of our largest local governments in the Upper Peninsula. Scott Erbisch, who is the County Administrator of Marquette County, and Brian Chapman, who is the City Manager of Sault Ste. Marie. So we have the Central UP in the eastern end. All three of us are alums of Northern Michigan University just by chance. I was hunting for someone that went to Tech, but it didn't work. I thought with my luck, we'd find somebody who was a city manager, but they played hockey for Tech, and then I didn't know what I would do. So, the purpose of today is just to sort of give our subscribers, our folks, a chance to hear about what are some of the issues facing you. So, Scott, what are some of the challenges facing Marquette County and counties in general in the UP?
I think, we'll probably get into some financial components at some point here as well. But I think one of the things we're really dealing with a lot of times is just some of the revenues that we have coming from the state of Michigan in particular. Counties are a little bit different than city governments, and where we have mandated programs in which we have to provide. And so for us to do that, for example, county jails, we have to provide a county jail. We have to provide a prosecuting attorney's office, register deed and clerk's office. And we really have been struggling at times to make sure that we're getting our full revenue sharing as a county for a full amount of that. And because it's not constitutionally approved, we have to make sure that we're advocating to make sure we're getting those dollars. These dollars that we get are critical in helping us pay for some of these services that we are mandated to provide. Counties are, in essence, an administrative arm of the state of Michigan, which a lot of people don't realize that. Those are what our first priorities are, in essence, before we get into our local government features that we have, which are similar to what Brian has. I think some of it is just the funding model that we have with the state of Michigan. Some of those challenges that we get will overlap. I'm thinking just even with property taxes are assessed and uncapped and other things. Both communities will, and both cities and counties will deal with those challenges as well. But it all comes down to some kind of stable funding mechanisms for Michigan counties that, especially when it's rural, there's not a lot of dollars that you capture. We used to say locally that our tax increases were basically flat for many years, up until recently when SEMCO did a really large project here, we started to see some increases. But we are seeing less than 1% overall tax increases in Marquette County, which is definitely having an effect. So the funding from the state becomes critical and something that we need to fight with as a whole for county governments.
Thanks. So, Brian, what about you over on the eastern end of the UP at Sault Ste. Marie? What problems are you facing? Or what excuse me.
Nope. I would say the finance is the biggest thing. Really, all problems can be solved if we just had a little bit more money. But I won't spend too much time on that, since Scott did a good job at kind of summarizing that, because what he was saying can be echoed by Sault Ste. Marie or really any kind of city in the UP. So aside from that, one of our biggest challenges is maintaining our infrastructure throughout the city, and that's roads, sidewalks, all the underground utilities, water, sewer, the plants. In particular, Sault Ste. Marie, I would say we are asset rich in the amenities that we have. We have a large ice stadium that has a sheet of ice. We have an older facility that has a sheet of ice. We've got countless parks. We've got 4 boat launches. A lot of assets here, an airport, all sorts of things that we have to maintain. And they're all, to a certain extent, fighting for the same pot of capital funding. So it's tough for us to keep up with the maintenance bills that are now due for a lot of our items. Just to be a little bit more specific, roads and our road funding. We have some local dollars that we get for road funding. We get a good portion from the state, but at this point, the quality of our roads are at a point where most of them have to be reconstructed. There's not a treatment process that can kind of extend some of those lives. So we every year do a PASER study on our roads, and the most recent one came back and said that our roads are 67% of our roads are at or near its end of a useful life. So we're not at this mode where we can maintain our streets anymore. We're actually just in full reconstruction mode, which adds a lot of dollars to our expenditures there. So, I would say infrastructure is one of the bigger challenges that we're having to deal with outside of funding everything else.
So, Scott, while we're on this issue of finance and challenges and opportunities, why don't you, both you and Brian, on behalf of Sault Ste. Marie and Marquette, have been involved in the so-called dark store loophole. Do you want to explain what that does to how it reduces revenue for local government?
Sure, I can start with that. Absolutely. When our first real significant loss was the Lowe's store, and that goes back probably 7 years ago, at least. And what happens is they challenge the larger corporate companies. That's why it was initially called the big box store issue, because it was done primarily by the larger big box stores that were challenging their tax assessments. What happens when they were successful, the first ones were successful, you started to see initial drop. There was first off money that had to be paid back, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars by the local governments to kick back and to that entity that was successful. But what you also saw was the cost of, there's other costs. There were other businesses that were filing those same or similar types of challenges, although they did not get to the tax tribunal. The local governments saw the cost in fighting those at the tax tribunal. Marquette Township, I think, spent over $250,000 just in challenging the Lowe's fight. We as a county have contributed in various efforts, probably close to $200,000 to try to get the law adjusted in a way that it does not negatively affect the local communities. So what you'll see though, because businesses will try to seek those similar types of reductions, the local municipal, rather than fight them, will sit down with the business and they'll come up with an agreed amount reduction. So even though it may not have ended up in the tax tribunal, they'll stipulate the taxes, and you'll continue to see more businesses with a reduced taxable value. And those start to compound. For Marquette County, Marquette Township alone, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars annually that we've been reduced as a result of the loss at the Lowe's store, plus other stores that have filed but have ultimately stipulated. Those are some significant impacts.
Well, these dollars would be spent on infrastructure. I know in Marquette, they had to close the library on Sundays because of loss of revenue. Can you give us a quick, what's a 60-second definition of the dark store loophole?
I was going to defer to Brian since I've talked too much already. So
60-second dark store loophole. So a brand new big box store, or now even medium-sized box store, comes in, and because of the precedent that's been established with prior case law, they are now comparing themselves to older facilities. So you got a brand new building that's comparing itself to the values of older buildings. So for example, here in the Sioux, we have a Target that's probably 2 years old, but during the tax tribunal process, their case was built up on comparables for facilities that were built in the early 90s or even older. So it's the definition would be, making themselves a little bit more profitable on the backs of the taxpayers. Kind of how I would define it.
And I would add to what Brian is saying, that one of the other challenges, one of the earlier frustrations in the arguments was not only are they, the example he gave, not only are they comparing themselves to older stores, they may not even be functioning as a similar type of building, a business any longer. The building may be vacant. It may have deed restrictions on it, which prohibits that facility from being utilized for a similar type of business. Say it might have been a Target that moved down the street, but the people using the dark store theory would use the vacant building that has deed restrictions on it that would prohibit it from selling towels or groceries and Tupperware again, which really limits the reuse of it. So these properties sit idle for a lot longer. And what we've argued early on in the process, because of the way this works and with the deed restrictions, a lot of these properties have actually become blighted. And those are the ones that have been brought in as comparisons, which we find disturbing in a way of how you would assess a property. So that's
the deed
restriction,
and the deed restrictions are self-imposed. When they build these buildings, the company will put those deed restrictions on the property. So that it's not even that somebody else is forcing them into the situation. Corporations are putting those deed restrictions on their own property and then building their case off that way.
Well, thank you. I want to move on to a different topic. And across the country, I've been reading that local governments are talking about staffing problems. And could you both talk about that from a rural county and a rural city perspective, even though you're largest and large employers? Is it impacting you in your county, Brian? I'll start with you this time, and in your city. And is it impacting your neighbor cities and townships?
Yep. So staffing challenges are apparent here in the Sioux. I can speak more specifically about what our situation is, but in my discussions with the hospital administrator, the school administrators, and even some of the private businesses, everybody's going through staffing challenges. Here, more specifically in the city organization, we have staffing challenges that are based on a variety of factors. Our rural location on the east side of the UP isn't as desirable to most as it is for me when I moved up here 2 years ago. The certifications for a lot of our positions have evolved over time, some of them being more difficult to obtain. For example, we had a gentleman that was our wastewater and water treatment plant supervisor. Over time, he was able to secure both operator certifications for those plants, but with changes in rules at the state level, it's impossible nowadays to really kind of find that person internally and get those certifications. They're now two distinct industries per se. So when we're going out and trying to find some of these, or try to fill some of these positions that we currently have open, we're not having the deepest pool of candidates. 10 years ago when I was in Wisconsin, I was in HR. When we had a police opening and we went through that process, we would have 100 applications and 100 candidates testing throughout that process to fill 1 or 2 spots. But now if we have 3 spots, we're getting maybe a couple applications in, and it's not always a quality individual for those positions. So it's been incredibly difficult in the 1.5 to 2 years that I've been here in the Sioux. We have replaced a number of department head level positions just through retirements. And it's been tough to find quality candidates for those positions. Kind of the frontline workers. We've been recruiting for firefighters for the last 8 months. We had a couple of candidates come in. They took jobs elsewhere. Same thing in the police department. We're really being hamstrung in progress for our community because we're unable to find applicants outside of the community that want to come up here. But also we have a hard time growing those types of candidates internally, especially for licensed positions.
So it's talent and people that don't want to move to the UP, both finding people. Okay. Scott, how about you?
We're seeing maybe not as much internally. We are having some challenges with specific roles internally for filling positions. I would agree with Brian that we've seen the pool of candidates dropping. Some of our areas of challenge, more so, Marquette County had some pretty robust, prior to the pandemic, construction periods here. And we were struggling to replace people in our codes division because the pay structures in the construction industry are great. So we currently have pretty much almost a full staff down there. I know that filling positions in some of our other more challenged areas like the jail is difficult. We're finding that pay structures in businesses locally are close enough to some of our positions, and they might have different flexible hours. And those people we do recruit sometimes will leave, but also it's just difficulty finding a volume of candidates. Local businesses, in particular in the service industry, I sit in on several committees, and they're struggling to get applicants, just having people come in and apply. We recently needed someone, a temporary position, and we worked with Manpower here locally, and Manpower said that they're having a hard time getting people to come and submit their credentials to Manpower to be able to help us. So even though we were fortunate enough to find someone, we were only provided 2 applicants for a position. They even had limitations on the number of applicants. So without question, there's a shortage of people looking to be employed at this point, or the qualifications are matching.
Thank you, Brian. So as we close up the interview time, tell us what is the most exciting thing that's happened in Sault Ste. Marie in the last year or two, and what are you excited about moving forward? At the same time, what keeps you up at night and prevents you from sleeping for the next couple of years?
So they're kind of one and the same at this point. The Soo has a lot of great things going on. We've got the Soo locks upgrade happening. That's a 10-year project with the Army Corps of Engineers. Internally, we have about $40 million of investments that we're making through federal grants and state grants and our own funding. We are upgrading roads. We're putting in a new carbide dock to facilitate cruise travel and some offloading there. So there's a lot of new projects coming forward in the Soo, but at the same time, that's what keeps me up at night, kind of for the various reasons that we talked about. It's difficult to find staff to help out on these projects. A lot of the projects that we're in the midst of that we're managing and administering, they were supposed to be done last year or 2 years ago. And just due to retirements or resignations, we went a very long time without having staff in those positions. So we're trying to play catch up. So just a lot of moving pieces right now, but there's a lot of great things too. Like I said, we got about $40 million in grants coming through. We've got $6 million going into our downtown for streets and utilities. A lot of great things happening, but at the same time, need the staff and the financing to be able to manage those projects. So that's the most exciting thing, and that's probably the thing that keeps me up at night too. And just some of the, the growing pains that come with closing parking lots and streets in a downtown area and trying to facilitate the parking and movement of people with all those. So it's a lot going on.
And housing's got to be a problem too, right? In terms of middle-class housing in the city limits. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yep. And it's price and it's quality. A new family moving into the city can find a house on the market. We have a rather large transient population between a lot of the federal agencies that we have here. So there are houses on the market, but the quality may not be there. And I know when I moved here, we probably had about 20 houses to look at, but probably only really 2 that we wanted to buy, just because the quality wasn't there. So it's not only just a price thing that people have to overcome, it's the quality of our housing stock that hamstrings us. And there's some new tools at the state level that we're trying to go after to see if we can't put in some better quality, more affordable housing, but it's a long road. But at the same time, we need this housing done probably like last week because all the contractors are coming in with their crews. The one project that is impacting us and Marquette County with the launch pads and the headquarters behind those type of projects, there's a good amount of staff that will be coming into the area behind both those projects. And the question is, where are they going to live? And obviously we want them to live in the Soo, but then the question is, do we have the quality housing or the housing stock that they're looking for to be able to do that?
Okay. Scott, what do you see as the great opportunity?
We've had some real positive things for several years. We've worked very hard to get funding to expand our hangars out at the former Air Force Base. The reason we do that is because with people, if they see them, think they're very large, but at the same time, they're being leased by a company called Envoy, and they do a maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility there. And while they're changing their planes out, and the new planes that they need to be doing the work on to help retain all these jobs have a higher tail height, and so we need to expand those hangars. We were fortunate enough to, after several years of working, to secure the funding, which will be about a $13 million project to expand those hangars. So that really is a wonderful thing. It helps solidify our interest in keeping Envoy here and building the right infrastructure that they need. We've also been really blessed this year through the pandemic with the receipt of additional funding. We picked up $18 million of CARES Act for the airport, which will help with needed work there for stabilizing that airport going forward. And we think that's real positive. We also have a lot of good things happening. We've got a newer public defender's office, and that's been up and running for a little over almost 2 years probably. And we're real happy the way that's working, really helping provide quality services to those that need those types of programs and services. We have a lot going on here from a challenging standpoint, things that keep me up at night. We also have a PFAS issue at the old Air Force Base, and at this point, we're working to try and get federal assistance to help with the cleanup when we know that we have a minimum of exposure of $3 to $4 million at this point. That's currently on our back to take care of. We have, and it's probably not unlike other places across the country, but we have a methamphetamine issue. I can speak to say that just in say 2013, we had 28 felony cases for that. And today in 2020, we had 229. So we're seeing significant increases in that, as well as our felony caseload, which is adding major burden to the court systems as a whole. So if you look back in 2013, we had 404 felony cases authorized, 2020, 839. These are substantial changes in a small community, and you see we're basically working within the same footprint of staff, but the volume of work has changed. There's a lot that keeps me up at night. These are some of the key ones. Affordable housing is high on everybody's list, as Brian was testing to. We have in the city of Marquette, it's very challenging for someone to find an affordable home. Our land bank has actually initiated a program where they built a spec home in a nearby community called Ishpeming, which will meet those, hopefully garner some interest in that range. And they're going to be building 4 or 5, but we're now concerned that how well will that program work if construction materials stay as high as they are. That could really impact what's able to be done from an affordable housing standpoint for both developers and programs like what we're working with.
Well, Rural Insights wants to thank you both, Scott Erbisch and Brian Chapman. We appreciate your spending time with our folks to learn about what's going on in these two really important locales in the Center UP and the Eastern UP. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.